The sun had begun to sink behind the rolling hills, bleeding red and gold into the horizon. Dusk was a dangerous hour in the village. Shadows lengthened, and with them came whispers, about curses, spirits, and the things that stirred when night approached. That evening the whispers carried a single name, spoken in tones of fear and contempt. She was only 23, but already marked by the elders as one who brought misfortune. They said the river ran dry after she washed her hair in its waters. They said children fell ill after her shadow touched them. They said mirrors cracked when she stood too close. It was not truth but gossip, not reason but fear. And yet fear had always been stronger than truth. At the center of the village stood an abandoned house, its walls crooked and its windows blind with dust. No one lived there anymore. No one dared. The house was said to be cursed, a place where voices echoed long after footsteps were gone. Inside, hidden behind a heavy wooden door, was a room lined with mirrors from floor to ceiling. No one knew who had built it or why. But the old ones claimed that mirrors were gateways, and that to be locked inside was to be left alone with the restless spirits of one's own reflection. That was where they were taking her. She did not struggle. She walked barefoot across the dirt road, her wrists bound with rope, her head lowered but her back straight. The crowd followed behind, their torches swaying, their eyes hungry with cruelty. Some spat curses at her. Others muttered prayers under their breath, as though her presence alone demanded protection. Children clung to their mothers, staring wide-eyed at the woman who was about to be swallowed by glass. The stepmother led the way. A tall woman with sharp cheekbones and a voice like a whip, she had long despised the girl. "Let the spirits decide," she had told the elders earlier that day. "If she is innocent, she will leave the room untouched. But if she is cursed, the mirrors will reveal her true face." The elders had nodded, too fearful to object. And so the verdict had been set. Now the young woman stood before the abandoned house, its door yawning open like a mouth waiting to swallow. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers turning into a chant. "Into the mirrors! Into the mirrors!" The air grew colder as she was shoved forward. She lifted her eyes once, gazing at the cracked windows, and for the briefest moment something flickered in her stare, defiance, sorrow, or perhaps a strength no one else could see. The stepmother sneered, tugging the ropes tighter around her wrists. "Look at her," she spat. "Even now she pretends to be innocent. But tonight the glass will speak, and lies cannot hide from their own reflection." The crowd laughed uneasily. The torches crackled. Somewhere far away, a dog howled at the growing night. The woman said nothing. She did not beg. She did not cry. She simply allowed herself to be led into the cursed house, her silence heavier than the chants that surrounded her. Behind her, the door groaned shut, and the whispers followed her into the dark. Before the whispers, before the curses, she had been the pride of her father's household. Her name carried softness, and her presence brought quiet comfort. At 23, her beauty was not loud but graceful, the kind that drew the eye without demanding it. Her voice was calm, her movements unhurried. She was the kind of woman who could sit beneath a tree and make silence feel like music. Children once ran to her, clinging to her skirts, begging for stories. Young men admired her from afar. Elders said she carried her late mother's spirit, kind, tender, steady as the river in its season. For a time people thought her blessed. But blessings turned quickly to curses in the mouths of the envious. It began with small things. One morning a farmer's best tool, a sharp iron hoe, snapped in two while he worked his field. He muttered that he had seen her pass by just before. Days later, another villager swore her shadow had crossed his doorway the night his child fell ill. Then, as the rains delayed their return, some said she had cursed the skies themselves. Coincidence is never enough for fearful hearts. They searched for someone to blame, and she was too perfect a target, young, beautiful, and without a mother to defend her. Her stepmother fanned the flames. Tall, sharp-eyed, her stepmother had never forgiven her for being loved so easily. While the daughter glowed with quiet dignity, the stepmother was brittle, her beauty faded, her words always coated in bitterness. She had married the girl's father hoping for wealth and respect, only to find herself overshadowed by the child of another woman. So when whispers began, she sharpened them into knives. "She smiles too much when others suffer," she said to the neighbors, her voice trembling as though in grief. "When my child coughs, I hear her laughter in the distance. She stares into the river for hours," she told the women at the well. "Tell me, who gazes so long into water unless she seeks another world within it?" And the cruelest lie of all, whispered when night was heavy and fear already thick. Her reflection walks when she sleeps. While she lies in bed, her mirror self wanders, carrying curses to our homes. The rumor spread like fire across dry grass. Some swore they had seen her window glow faintly at night, as though the mirrors themselves caught light no lamp had given. Others claimed their dreams filled with her face, pale and watching from the glass. Every accident became proof. If a pot shattered, it was her unseen hand. If a goat went missing, it was her cursed eyes. If thunder struck too close, it was her reflection, angry at being confined. The stepmother smiled behind closed doors, watching the noose of suspicion tighten around the girl's neck. But in public she wore the mask of sorrow. "I do not wish to speak against her," she would sigh, hand pressed to her chest. "But what choice do I have if her very breath brings misfortune? If her shadow walks while she sleeps, what safety remains for us?" The elders listened. The villagers murmured. And with every word the young woman's world grew smaller, colder. She felt it first in the eyes of those who once smiled at her. Now they turned away or worse looked at her with fear. The children no longer tugged at her skirts. The women whispered when she drew water at the well. And the young men who once admired her crossed the road rather than risk brushing against her sleeve. The world had shifted, though she had done nothing. She could not fight shadows with words, for words were twisted against her. And so she remained silent, carrying her sorrow like a stone pressed deep into her chest. But the stepmother was not done. When the drought stretched longer, when the elders grew desperate, she delivered the final poison. Her reflection does not belong to her. It belongs to something else. And if we do not act, it will come for us all. It was then the elders called for the council beneath the baobab tree, where whispers would become verdicts and lies would become law. Beneath the towering baobab tree, the village gathered. Its roots twisted like the veins of the earth, its branches spread wide enough to cast a shadow over all who stood beneath it. The air was heavy with heat, yet colder than it should have been, as though the tree itself anticipated what was to be decided. The elders sat in a half-circle, their staffs pressed into the dust, their faces carved with years and with worry. Around them, villagers crowded close, murmuring low, the way people speak when they fear the very sound of their voices might stir something listening. Children clung to their mothers' skirts. The men shuffled with unease. Even the birds had gone silent in the branches above. At the center she stood, the accused. Her dress was plain, her hair falling loose across her face, her eyes lowered but steady. At 23 she had known sorrow, but nothing like this, to stand in front of her people as if she were a disease given human form. Her stepmother rose slowly from the crowd, draped in dark cloth, her eyes glittering like stones caught in sunlight. Her voice was steady, too steady when she spoke. "We have all seen it," she said, her gaze sweeping the circle. "Accidents too many to be chance. The broken harvest. The sick children. The storms. Shadows that walk where she does not. Tell me, can this be ignored?" The crowd rumbled in uneasy agreement. Fear is a chain, and once linked, no one dares break it. "She is cursed," the stepmother pressed on. "Her reflection does not obey her. Her own shadow betrays her. And if we do nothing, the spirits she serves will consume us all." One elder lifted his staff. His voice was cracked like dry wood. "What then do you suggest, woman? Speak plain." The stepmother turned, and for a moment, her smile flickered, a cruel triumph barely concealed. "Lock her with her own reflections," she said. "There is a room built long ago, filled with mirrors from the coast. You all know it. It was sealed after the mirror curses came, after men claimed their faces did not return to them. If her spirit is pure, she will be untouched. But if it is foul, her own reflections will devour her." A shiver moved through the crowd. The old stories were not often spoken aloud, but everyone knew them. Mirrors were not to be trusted. They were said to be doors, doors that did not always open back into the same place they began. "She would not survive a night in that place," muttered one man. "That is the point," another whispered. The accused finally lifted her head. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. She wanted to shout her innocence, to cry out that she had harmed no one, that she prayed for the harvest as they all did, that she loved children as if they were her own. But the silence of the crowd weighed down on her heavier than chains. She saw no mercy in their faces. Another elder spoke, his voice solemn as though speaking against his own heart. "The spirits must decide. We are but men and women, and men cannot see truth hidden in shadows. If her reflection is false, then let it reveal itself." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded, others crossed themselves with gestures meant to ward off evil. The judgment had already taken root. Her stepmother stepped closer, her voice sharp as a blade. "Lock her there tonight. If she survives, we will know she walks with blessings. If she does not, then we are freed of her curse. The circle fell into silence. Only the wind sighed through the baobab branches above. Finally, the eldest of them all, a man whose hair was white as ash, struck his staff against the ground. "So be it," he said. "The girl shall be taken to the mirror room before sunset. By dawn the spirits will give their answer." Gasps rippled through the villagers. Children hid their faces. Some muttered that no one had entered that room in a generation. Others whispered that even the spirits would not dare look too long into those mirrors. But the verdict had been spoken. The girl's knees weakened, though she did not fall. She only clenched her hands at her sides and lifted her eyes, meeting her stepmother's gaze. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something flicker in her own reflection, shining in the woman's eyes, something waiting, something patient. And then the guard stepped forward to lead her away. The door groaned open, wood straining against rusted hinges. A smell of dust and dampness drifted out, thick as if the room had been holding its breath for decades. The guards shoved her forward and her bare feet slid across the threshold. Inside, the room was a prison made of glass. Every wall was covered with mirrors, some tall and cracked, some round like staring eyes, some warped so that faces stretched and twisted into grotesque shapes. Their frames were of different origins: carved wood from the coast, iron twisted into spirals, even one rimmed with bone bleached by age. No two mirrors were the same, yet all of them reflected her. Dozens of her faces staring back, pale in the lantern light, eyes wide, lips trembling. But they did not move in unison. Some seemed a heartbeat slower. Others tilted their heads when she did not. One reflection smiled faintly though she did not. A shiver crawled down her spine. The guard set a single lantern on the floor, its flame sputtering weak against the dark. Shadows wavered across the glass, multiplying until the room seemed full of shifting figures. Then they pulled the door shut. The bolt slid into place with a finality that made her chest tighten. Silence. She pressed her back against the door as if she could draw strength from its solidity. The air was unnaturally cold, her breath misting faintly before her. Each inhalation echoed, caught and thrown back at her by the mirrors, as if a chorus of unseen voices breathed with her. She dared a step forward. Every reflection moved, but not all at once. A fraction of them lagged behind, their eyes following too slowly. One on the far wall blinked when she did not. Her throat tightened. She looked down to avoid them, but even the floor held fragments of glass, broken shards half buried in dust. They reflected her toes, her dress, the shaking of her hands. There was no escape from her own image. The lantern flickered lower. With each dip of the flame, the mirrors seemed to lean closer. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She whispered a prayer under her breath, but the mirrors seemed to mouth the words back at her. Not perfectly, but with strange, twisted intonations like children mocking. She shut her eyes. Darkness was safer than those faces. Yet even then she felt watched. The room was alive, listening, waiting. A faint sound, a tap, gentle but sharp, came from behind her eyelids. She opened them. One mirror, larger than the rest, rippled as though water had passed across its surface. Her reflection wavered, stretched, then stilled again. She stepped back, pressing against the opposite wall, but there was no distance. Her face multiplied behind her, beside her, around her. The lantern guttered, shadows slithered. She forced herself to breathe, to remain upright. The villagers wanted her broken, sobbing, begging. She would not give them that. Not even here, where glass seemed sharper than knives. Her voice cracked as she spoke into the silence, testing her strength. "I am not afraid." Dozens of lips formed the words. But one reflection did not. It only watched her. The room breathed with her. Every sigh, every step, every twitch of her fingers came back multiplied, dozens of movements in fractured harmony. The mirrors were relentless. They did not allow her a single moment alone. At first she tried not to look. She sank to the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, whispering prayers between dry lips. The lantern's faint glow stretched her shadow into 100 broken shapes. But inevitably her gaze lifted. Her eyes met themselves. Everywhere. Her head bowed in unison. Her lips moved in unison. Her chest rose and fell in unison. Yet not all at the same time. Sometimes the gestures came a fraction late, like a badly timed echo. Sometimes a smile hovered on a face she knew had not smiled. The lantern sputtered, its flame fighting the chill that seeped from the glass. As its light dipped, the mirrors seemed to lean closer, as if eager to swallow her. She pressed her palms together and prayed harder. "Ancestors, protect me. Spirits of truth, hear me. Do not let me be lost." Her whispers trembled, but in the glass they returned stronger, multiplied, layered atop one another until it seemed an entire crowd of voices prayed back at her. She froze, breath catching. She had prayed quietly. She had spoken barely above a murmur. But the mirrors shouted. The lantern crackled, almost dying, then flared again. In that moment she saw it. One reflection, near the far left corner, moved differently. Her hands were still clasped in prayer, fingers interwoven, trembling near her chin. But in that particular mirror, the girl's hands had already dropped to her lap. The head bowed too late, as if the reflection were thinking about whether or not to follow. Her breath turned sharp, shallow. She squeezed her eyes shut and opened them again. The mirrors were normal now, all moving as she moved. Yet her skin crawled. She pressed her back against the wall, wishing the wood would open and let her escape. The whispers returned. At first she thought they were her own imagination, echoes of her prayer bouncing inside her skull. But no, the sound was real. The glass trembled faintly with it, shuddering like water disturbed by a stone. A low murmur, not words at first, just tones rising and falling like breath. Then shapes formed. She is here. The words slithered across the mirrors. Her heart stopped. Her gaze darted from one reflection to another. Which one had spoken? The lips in the glass twitched, some barely moving, some open as if in a silent scream. Yet one voice, deep, distorted, cut through. She does not belong. She staggered back, clutching her chest. No. Her own reflection whispered the denial back at her. But one face didn't. That same lagging reflection. Its mouth did not move at all. Its eyes were too steady, too knowing. And in its silence, it felt more alive than all the others. She crawled to the lantern, holding it close, shielding its weak glow with her body. The warmth on her skin steadied her, but only for a heartbeat. The glass walls quivered again, the whispers tightening, overlapping. Pray louder. Pray softer. Pray to us. The voices blended into a storm, circling her from every direction. She shut her ears with her palms, rocking, whispering her prayer again and again. Ancestors, hold me. Ancestors, see me. The flame dipped. The reflections blurred. And there, clear as day, the same late-moving reflection tilted its head. Not in unison. Not forced by her. It tilted in mockery. Her blood turned cold. The lantern sputtered, nearly out. Shadows swallowed her. Dozens of eyes gleamed in fractured glass. And somewhere in the darkness of her own reflection, something else was watching. The air grew heavier as the night deepened. The lantern was little more than a dying ember, its light shivering against the glass walls. Every reflection shimmered faintly in the dimness, a distorted army of herself trapped in endless repetition. Then the bell of midnight tolled. Not a real bell, but the memory of one, deep, thunderous, echoing through her bones as if the night itself had struck some unseen clock. In that exact moment she felt it. The room stopped breathing with her. She turned her head slowly, forcing her eyes to meet the mirrors. Dozens of faces mirrored her hesitation, lips pressed tight, eyes wide in fear. Yet in the far corner of the room, one face did not follow. It stared directly back at her, unmoving. Her breath hitched. She blinked, lifted a trembling hand toward her chest. All the other reflections did the same, but not that one. Its arms hung still at its sides. Its eyes glowed faintly, a shimmer like moonlight on dark water. No, she whispered. The reflection's lips curled into a smile. Her own mouth stayed frozen. Her body broke out in chills. She stumbled back, heart pounding so violently she thought it would shatter her ribs. The glass in front of her fogged faintly with her breath, but in the cursed mirror, the glass remained perfectly clear, as though no living body stood on this side. She lifted her hand again, desperate to test it. Slowly, she pressed her palm against the cool surface of the nearest mirror. Her reflection pressed back, perfectly aligned, flesh meeting flesh in imitation. She turned toward the corner. The unmoving one did nothing. It only smiled wider, lips curling upward until the expression was too large, too sharp, too humanly impossible. The skin at its cheeks seemed to stretch, and the glow in its eyes burned brighter. Her knees weakened and she collapsed onto the wooden floor. The lantern rattled beside her, flame flickering dangerously low. In its frail light, the other mirrors blurred into shadows, yet that one face remained disturbingly clear, as though lit by a fire no one else could see. Her throat was dry, but a word tore out anyway. Why? The sound echoed back, dozens of mirrors repeating it with slight delays, overlapping until it became a chorus of her own voice. But when she stopped speaking, the reflection's lips moved for the first time. not hers. The glass trembled as a voice, low and crawling, slid out. Because you looked. She scrambled back, slamming into the opposite wall, hands clutching her arms to her chest. No, no, you are not me. The reflection tilted its head. The rest of her images followed her movement, but this one's tilt was slower, deliberate, filled with something like mockery. Its voice seeped out again. I am what they see. The shadow they fear. The lies they whisper. I am the truth behind their curse. Her chest heaved. You are not real. The grin widened, teeth too sharp, eyes now glowing like embers. Then why can you hear me? Her scream caught in her throat. The lantern sputtered again, almost gone. For a moment, total darkness threatened to swallow her. Then, flare. The flame burst back with a hiss, and in that violent flash she saw the reflection's hands press against the glass. Not flat like hers would. No. The fingers curled as though they were searching for cracks. Her body shook uncontrollably. She pressed herself harder against the wall, wishing she could vanish into it. The whispers returned, dozens of echoes, her own face speaking in unison. But this one voice rose above them all, cutting clear, louder. You cannot run. You brought me forth. And now? The reflection leaned closer, its forehead nearly pressing against the glass. Its eyes glowed so brightly the other mirrors dimmed in comparison. I will not go back. The lantern gave its final sputter and died. Darkness consumed the room, but she could still see those eyes, burning, alive, staring at her from inside the mirror. And for the first time she realized the glass no longer separated her from it. The darkness pressed heavy, but those eyes still glowed. They were not fire, not lantern flame, but something older, deeper, crawling with knowing. She sat frozen, back against the wall, every part of her trembling, waiting for the next horror. Then the voice came again. Oh, velvet. Sliding through the room as though the mirrors themselves were mouths. You are not alone. Her chest clenched. The words were not mocking this time. They were almost tender, almost familiar, like a memory spoken back to her. You are theirs no longer. They chained you with lies, but we will free you. The reflection stirred. All around her, dozens of her faces began to hum, lips moving though hers remained still. The sound was strange, a vibration rather than a song, deep like bees in a hive, yet layered with whispers that carried words she could not quite understand. The air quivered. The glass trembled. Cracks began to crawl across the mirrors, thin as spider threads at first, then branching wider. Each snap was sharp like the breaking of bones. Yet instead of shattering, the cracks pulsed faintly with light, as though something alive was pushing against them from the other side. Her heartbeat raced in time with the sound. Crack, pulse. The rhythm grew, shaking the wooden floor beneath her. Dust drifted from the ceiling, and the lantern, though dead, rattled on the ground as if disturbed by unseen hands. She wanted to scream, but the sound would not come. Instead, she clutched her arms around herself, eyes darting from mirror to mirror as the voices swelled. Free you, free you, free you. Her own face multiplied, fractured by the growing cracks, each mouth whispering in eerie unison. Outside the cursed room, the villagers stirred. From their posts beyond the bolted door, a few men lifted their heads. Strange sounds leaked through the wood, humming, breaking glass, whispers that carried no breath. One man pressed his ear to the door and immediately pulled back, face pale, swearing he had heard a voice speak his name from the other side. Another spat on the ground. Spirits are at work. We must not enter. The women clutched their children tighter, huddling near the fire. The storm above the village had calmed, but here, around the mirror house, the air swirled unnaturally, a chill that stung their skin. One of the elders muttered, "The glass is waking." But none dared move closer. None dared open the door. Inside, the woman stared as the unnatural reflection leaned forward, pressing its palms against the fractured glass. Instead of bleeding, the cracks shimmered like veins of silver light. The glow spread until nearly every mirror in the room pulsed with the same sickly radiance. She shook her head, voice raw. What are you? The reflection smiled, teeth catching the glow. We are you. The part they buried. The voice they silenced. The truth they feared. Her tears slid down her cheeks. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled. The hum vibrated in her bones now, rattling her teeth. You cannot hold us back, the whisper continued. When they caged you in glass, they caged themselves as well. And now? The mirrors shuddered violently. Splinters of glass began to peel from the walls, hanging in the air like shards caught in invisible threads. Each piece reflected her face but twisted, some weeping, some laughing, some staring blankly with hollow eyes. Now the glass remembers. The villagers outside backed farther away as the sound grew louder, a chorus of cracking and whispering, as though 1,000 unseen mouths were speaking through the wood. The children cried, begging their mothers not to let the woman out. The elders pressed their hands to their ears, unable to endure the sound. But no one entered. No one stopped it. And in the suffocating dark of that mirror room, she realized that what stared back at her was not her reflection anymore. It was something waiting to be born. The hum rose until it was no longer sound but pressure, a weight crushing the chest, shaking the bones, rattling the teeth. She clutched her head and fell to her knees, unable to withstand the storm of whispers that now poured from every surface of the room. The mirrors were alive. Her reflections pulsed with silver light, fissures spreading across their glass cages like veins filled with fire. One by one they leaned forward, faces pressing against the cracks as though desperate to break free. And at the center of them all was her, the reflection that had first betrayed its independence, the one that smiled when she did not. It pressed its hand against the glass, palm glowing faintly, and whispered in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "It is time." The mirror split down the middle with a sound like thunder. Shards slid outward without falling, suspended in the air as if held by unseen hands. From within the fractured pane, the reflection stepped forward, separating from the glass as though walking through water. It was her, yet not her. Her same body, her same eyes, but glowing faintly as if carved from moonlight. Where her own lips trembled in terror, this double's mouth curved into a calm, knowing smile. Its feet touched the floor with no sound, and the lantern's dying flame reignited at its presence, burning steady, strong. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She tried to crawl back, but her limbs gave out. Exhaustion, fear, and the crushing hum had stolen her strength. She collapsed, cheek pressed against the cold wooden floor. The double bent down, hair cascading like black silk, and placed its hand gently beneath her chin. The touch was warm, almost human. "Do not fear," it whispered. "You carried us this long. Now we will carry you." With effortless strength, the reflection lifted her from the ground, cradling her as though she weighed nothing. Her head lolled against the glowing shoulder, her breath shallow but alive. Around them, the mirrors began to explode one by one. First a crack, then a shatter. Shards of glass burst outward, freezing in midair like stars suspended in a night sky. Each fragment still carried her face, twisted into different emotions: anger, grief, joy, despair, all of them screaming without sound as they spun in orbit. Chains rattled on the door. The villagers outside gasped, scrambling back as the wooden frame shook violently. Bolts groaned and the heavy padlock quivered as though struck by invisible hands. One of the men dropped his spear and fled into the night, shouting that the spirits were loose. Inside the storm grew. The glass fragments circled the room faster and faster, until their hum became a single deafening note. The reflection carried her toward the center, its glowing body untouched by the whirling storm. The final mirror shattered. The sound was unlike glass breaking, deeper, more final, as though the air itself had been split open. Every shard froze mid-spin, then rained down like silver rain, embedding into the wooden floor but never cutting them. The chains on the door snapped. Metal links whipped through the air and fell lifeless to the ground. The bolts tore free with a shriek. And then, silence. The villagers pressed against one another, staring wide-eyed at the trembling door. None dared to touch it. Children whimpered, mothers held them close, and the elders whispered prayers to gods they had not spoken to in years. From within, a low glow seeped through the cracks of the wooden planks, spilling onto the earth outside like liquid moonlight. The door creaked. Slowly, painfully. When it opened, the villagers gasped as though the very night had been torn apart. There she stood, yet doubled. The woman, pale and weak, leaning against the arm of her glowing twin. And the twin's eyes, burning faint and silver, swept across the crowd with neither malice nor mercy. The villagers dropped their gazes at once, unable to bear the weight of that stare. The wind died. The night fell still. Even the dog stopped barking. The stepmother, hidden at the edge of the crowd, clutched her chest as dread hollowed her bones. She alone recognized what had happened, what had been born from the cruelty she had sown. The reflection shifted its grip, cradling the woman closer. Then it stepped forward, out of the cursed house, over the broken chains, past the shattered glass, carrying her into the night as though she were a bride being led away. The villagers parted like grass before fire. And behind them, the room of mirrors lay in ruin, its shards glimmering faintly before fading to dull, lifeless glass. The curse had broken. Or perhaps, it had only just begun. The village awoke as if struck by thunder. From every hut, from every fire pit, people rushed into the night, drawn by the strange glow spilling from the cursed house. The ground itself seemed to vibrate with the force of what was happening inside. The drums of panic beat in every chest. Mothers clutched children to their sides, men raised spears though their hands shook uncontrollably, and elders leaned on their staffs whispering half-remembered prayers. Then the sound came. It began as a low hum, a vibration that prickled the skin, then rose higher until it cracked the night in two. Suddenly, an explosion of light burst through the wooden walls. Shards of glass shot outward like a hailstorm of silver, scattering across the courtyard. They landed without cutting, but wherever they fell, villagers swore they saw faces reflected. Her faces, twisted in grief, rage, or joy, staring back before fading into nothing. A scream tore through the crowd. Someone dropped to his knees, clutching his head, crying out that the ancestors had returned. Others stumbled backward, trampling one another in their desperation to escape the storm of light. A group of young men, bold a moment before, now flung down their weapons and fled into the trees. The cursed house pulsed again, its broken door glowing like the eye of a great beast. From within came a presence, something that made even the air feel heavier, harder to breathe. "Spirits," an elder croaked, his voice cracking. "The mirrors have opened." And then the door creaked. Every voice fell silent, every breath caught. The wooden planks swung slowly apart, and from the darkness emerged a sight that none would ever forget. The young woman, pale and broken, leaned weakly against something that should not exist. Her own reflection, walking free of glass, glowing faint and steady. Together they stepped into the night, the woman carried as though weightless in the arms of her shimmering twin. The villagers wailed. Some fell to their knees, pressing their foreheads into the dirt, begging forgiveness from powers they did not understand. Others shrieked in terror, scattering like frightened birds into the shadows. A mother fainted, her child screaming as neighbors dragged her away. Even the dogs turned tail, howling as they vanished into the dark. Only one figure did not run. At the edge of the trembling crowd, the stepmother stood rooted in place. Her lips quivered, her knees knocked together, but she could not move. Her eyes widened as the reflection's silver gaze swept across the villagers, pausing when it found her. It looked into her, through her, as though stripping the flesh from her bones. And she knew. She knew this was no accident, no random spirit loosed by chance. This was judgment. Judgment she herself had called down when she whispered her lies, when she spread her poison against the girl she had sworn to protect. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought it might burst. Sweat ran cold down her back. She wanted to scream, to run, to claw at the ground and vanish, but her legs betrayed her. The reflection's eyes pinned her in place as surely as iron chains. The woman in its arms stirred faintly, her lips parting though no sound came. But the reflection bent its head close and whispered words only she could hear. A faint smile touched her broken face, as though in that moment, despite the fear, she understood. The stepmother's breath hitched. Her body trembled violently. She stumbled backward into the crowd, knocking against others, but they shrank away from her as though she carried a plague. No one would stand beside her now. Because they all saw it too. The reflection was not watching the village. It was watching her. And in that silent, merciless stare, the stepmother realized, her lies had not only condemned the innocent. They had summoned her own doom. The air grew still, though the storm's echoes had not yet faded. Broken shards of glass glittered across the earth, catching the moonlight like scattered stars. Yet in every shard, the villagers saw movement, faces that were not their own. The reflection carried the young woman forward, silver light rippling with every step. Its voice was low but sharp, slicing through the night. "You trapped her in lies. Now face your own truth." The crowd parted. All eyes turned to the stepmother. She stumbled back, her face pale as ashes, but the shards beneath her feet shifted as though alive. One piece of mirror rose from the ground, hovering before her eyes. In it, she saw not her face as it was now, but as it had been. Lips curled in gossip, tongue whispering venom, eyes burning with envy. "No, no, this is not me," she cried, clawing at the air. But the reflection within the shard did not vanish. It grew stronger. The mirrored version of herself reached outward, fingers pressing through the glass. Before the stepmother could flee, the shard latched onto her hand, pulling with irresistible force. Her scream pierced the night. The villagers gasped as her body convulsed, half in the world, half inside the mirror. Her legs kicked against the dirt, her nails tore bloody lines into the ground, but the reflection dragged her deeper. Her voice cracked into a wail of pure terror. Forgive me. Forgive me. Spirits, I was only jealous. I was only... The last of her words cut short as she was pulled fully inside, the shard ceiling shut. The glass clinked softly against the ground, now showing only her face inside, pounding soundlessly, her mouth open in a scream no one could hear. The villagers recoiled, trembling. But the reflection was not done. It turned its silver gaze toward the circle of elders. Men who had sat under the baobab tree, who had nodded when the stepmother demanded punishment. Their staffs shook in their hands. We only followed the counsel, we only listened to the people, one stammered. The reflection lifted its hand. Shards scattered across the dirt rose into the air, spinning slowly like deadly stars. In each shard the elders saw themselves, not as leaders but as cowards. They saw their faces turning away from truth, their lips whispering judgment, their silence as a young woman's fate was sealed. One elder gasped and covered his eyes, but the shard followed him, hovering inches from his face. He dropped his staff and fell to his knees, sobbing. Another tried to run, but a piece of glass cut across his path, showing him his own reflection, eyes closed, refusing to see. No, no more, he wailed, clawing at the dirt. But there was no escape. From that night on, every mirror, every polished surface betrayed them. When they drank from water gourds, they saw their own twisted faces staring back. When they polished brass ornaments, their sins looked back at them, heavier than any chain. Sleep brought no relief, the shards of dream mirrored them still. The reflection's voice rolled through the night like thunder. The lies you weave return to you. The truths you bury rise in glass. None may escape their own reflection. The crowd wept, some bowing low, some shielding their eyes from the cursed sight. Children clung to their mothers, too afraid to look into the shards scattered at their feet. But the young woman, weak though she was, stirred in the arms of her double. Her sewn lips trembled, a faint breath escaping though no sound carried. Still her eyes spoke, eyes filled not with vengeance but with sorrow. The reflection bent close, listening to the breath of her silence. Then it nodded, lowering her gently to the ground. The stepmother was gone. The elders were cursed. And the villagers, their fear turned to reverence, realized they had witnessed a judgment no mortal power could undo. The shards lay across the earth, glimmering faintly. In each, villagers whispered, one could still see faces, faces of guilt, faces of envy, faces of lies. A warning carved forever into glass. And in the center of it all, the young woman sat beneath the moon, surrounded by broken mirrors. She lifted her gaze skyward, her sewn lips glowing faintly, as though the silence itself had become holy. Years bled into decades, and the night of broken glass became a memory buried deep in the soil of the village. The house where it all happened, the cursed house with the mirror room, was left to rot. Its roof caved slowly, beams blackened with mold and weeds clawed through its foundations. The once gleaming shards of glass still lay scattered, dull by day, yet sharp as the moon when night returned. No one entered. No one dared. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, their words carried only in whispers by the fireside. Travelers who passed through asked about the abandoned ruin at the village's edge, and the elders would hush them with a warning look. Do not ask. Do not stare. That house has eyes. Children, curious and bold, would sometimes creep near at dusk. They would dare one another to touch the broken wall or peer through the cracks where shadows lingered. But always, before their courage failed, the warnings of their mothers came rushing back. Never mock the reflection, for it remembers. The story was told again and again. Of the girl whose beauty had sparked jealousy, whose kindness was twisted into a curse by whispers, and who was locked in a room where mirrors breathed with more life than men. The elders who had once condemned her grew old in shame, haunted until their deaths. They avoided basins of water and covered polished bowls with cloth, yet the reflection still found them. Their cries at night were enough to keep children from sleep, for they swore hands reached out of mirrors to drag them inside. The stepmother's name faded from the records as though silence itself erased her. But it was said that if one looked long enough into the glass of that ruined house, one might see a woman's face screaming from within, trapped forever, pounding against her own reflection. Over the years, storms became the true messengers of the tale. When clouds gathered and the sky tore open with lightning, the villagers whispered that the air changed around the ruins. The wind carried a hum, a sound like glass shivering. And if you dared approach, you would hear faint whispers, like dozens of voices speaking at once, repeating words no mortal could understand. Some said it was the cursed elders, their guilt echoing eternally. Others believed it was the reflection itself, the double that had stepped from glass and judged them all. But most feared that it was her, the young woman, lips still bound by threads of silence, her spirit now entwined with the mirrors themselves. Generations passed. Parents kept their children far from the ruin, but stories had a way of seeping into young ears like smoke. On stormy nights, children pressed their faces to their windows, searching the sky, and swore they saw glints of light dancing where no torch burned. They claimed that, for a moment, the mirrors long buried beneath weeds shone as if polished by unseen hands. And always the same warning lingered. Never mock the reflection, for it remembers. The village itself changed. New huts rose, harvests grew, people laughed and sang again. Yet whenever someone caught their reflection flicker in the corner of their eye, moving just a breath slower, smiling just a little too long, they would fall silent, their stomachs tightening. The legend lived not only in the ruined house, but in every scrap of glass, every bowl of water, every polished stone. Because no one could truly escape reflection. On the darkest nights, when the storm broke open and lightning lit the sky, some swore they could see her. A young woman's reflection, untouched by time, staring from the broken glass. Her lips, though still sewn, curled into a smile. Not of malice, not of vengeance, but of something colder. Something eternal. The children who heard this would shiver and draw closer to the fire, staring at the flames so they would not see their own reflections in the darkened bowls beside them. For the elders always ended the story with the same words, spoken slow and steady. Never silence truth and never scorn the mirror. For glass remembers what men forget. And when lightning strikes, the reflection smiles.